Well, given your time is limited, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump straight in. So I was struck by your synthesis report the other day. I personally found it kind of devastating. I just wondered, how about you? What was your reaction to that? Were you depressed by it on the one hand, or were you hopeful on the other hand? Because, obviously the report, as it made clear, is only a small, only a small number of, only a small percentage of the world's emitters, about 30%. So I wondered how you felt.
Well, definitely it was very bad news. It kind of confirmed the bad scenario that we had been talking about. It confirmed that we really are in a climate emergency. That when we say climate emergency, it is really there. The figure that the effect combined of those NDCs that were presented are less than a 1% reduction compared to 2010 values, and IPCC is asking us for 45% minimum by 2030 is really a very, very a wake-up call, to say the least. So yes, well, I fear that we would have bad news, and in that sense, well, it was not really a surprise. But I still think this initial NDC report is very helpful because it illustrates very well how grave the situation is, how difficult it is, and how much urgency we need to impress in decision making and in actions.
Got you. And how many? I wondered if you've spoken to many. One of your points in there was that you made the call that that countries should consider resubmitting. Because obviously some didn't increase their ambition. I just wondered if you have talked to any G20 governments, and how many have you spoken to since the report?
Well, since the report, I'm not so sure, but I've been talking with all of them actually, without interruption. Even in the case of those who submitted and those who we felt they could maybe do something better. So this report allowed us to reconfirm, insist, to show the evidence that what we are asking them to do is actually the correct thing. And it is our role because we are the guardians of the climate change regime. This is our obligation, and this is, our voice needs to be heard in this sense. And it's not pointing fingers at anyone. It's just reminding that there is a collective obligation that the international community has engaged in these commitments with the conviction that it is in their best interest, in the best interest of their populations, and therefore, we need to really abide to it.
Sure, that makes sense. And can I just ask you, looking forward, the year is obviously dominated by COP26. So I just wondered, what would a successful summit look like? And I'm particularly interested in what it might look like for the general public, because obviously there's what those things might be, because obviously it's really important Paris rulebook stuff that you need to get done, and Article 6, and I get why that's really important. But to most people, it's kind of meaningless, right? They don't, that's not something they're going to understand. So I wondered what might be some of the big things you would like to see out of it, whether it's around coal moratoria, or some of your predecessors have called for a 45% greenhouse gas target for 2030 to be in there. I don't know. What would you like to see?
Well, I would say, first of all, that in this very, very complex world and very, very complex issue, because climate change is a very complex issue to address, there is not just one or two specific things that need to be achieved for the conference to be a success. I think that if we want the conference to be a success, the overall message that needs to come out of it is that, yes, there is the leadership needed and the political will needed to drive the world towards the transformation that is required to still get us on track to get to the 1.5-degree goal by the end of the century. And that needs to come across through really a package of decisions and actions that reflect different realities. And now, if I would want to try to tell more specifically, what does that mean? Well, I've come up with 4 points. The first point would be promises made must be promises kept. That means whatever we have committed to do until 2020, now is the time to have it really delivered. And that relates to adaptation goals, relates to mitigation goals, to finance, specifically the 100 billion. Mm-hmm. Right? That needs to be delivered. It's not, we are not there. And so even in the cases where we have not seen that delivery yet, and this is my hope that in the coming months before November, we will see some specific progress towards that. Second point will be about the negotiations, as you mentioned. We need to wrap up the outstanding issues under the negotiations. We've been, and as you say, these are issues that people, the regular citizen doesn't understand. Why is it that you have been negotiating for 5 years and you continue to negotiate, right? So this is absolutely necessary. And the third point is that we need to raise ambition in mitigation, in adaptation, and in finance. It's not only about reducing greenhouse gases. It's also, it's of course one very central piece, but it's also about creating resilience and adapting to the effects that we are already feeling. And third, it is about the finance. And the finance, in the context of COVID, that we are seeing really literally trillions of dollars being mobilized for recovery plans from COVID, that creates a very important opportunity to do 2 things. One, to align those recovery plans to Paris, to introduce really in a very rigorous way the climate risk element into any investments that will be made, and also to provide the funds that are needed for the transformation in developing countries. And the fourth element, I would say, is that we cannot leave anyone behind and leave no solution outside. That means working with the private sector, working with the cities, working with subnational governments, with academia, with the scientists. Everybody needs to be on board.
Great, that's really helpful. And I suppose the my next question really is really the sort of mirror of that question, which is obviously we all hope it will be a roaring success, but what are the most likely triggers for failure in your mind? And also, if there is some sort of failure, what might the consequence be for United Nations climate change? I wondered.
Well, let me say frankly, I see COP26 as really a credibility test for the fight against climate change. I think, if we go back to the figure that we were mentioning, the less than 1% reduction, right? And we look at the fact that we need to be at 45% in only 10 years. That means that really decisions need to be made now. Because this transformation of the current societies and economies into low carbon societies, low carbon economies will take some time. That means really that systematically every decision about investments, every decision about, public policies needs to have to go through the lens of climate risk. And so the sense of urgency needs to be at the center of the attention of all political leadership, but not only the politicians, also in the private sector, also, even at the individual level. What is one element that is really critical in addition to this? It's finance. It's finance. I mean, we were talking about the 100 billion goal that was adopted 10 years ago.
2009, yeah, I remember, yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So now, and we have spent 10 years talking about how we are going to put together the 100 billion. And in 1 year, completely unplanned, we are seeing 12 trillion being mobilized for recovery from COVID. So that doesn't make much sense, So finance is absolutely crucial. And also because, okay, let's assume Europe has put together this fantastic Green New Deal, and Europe has the possibility of mobilizing a lot of resources. And let's imagine that they really have a very successful implementation. But if that doesn't happen in Africa or Asia or other areas in the world, those efforts will be undermined. So it is really an issue. I think there we need to change the mindset. It's the financing for others is not about helping others. It's us achieving our existential, addressing our existential threat.
I see what you mean. So I had clocked you'd already said finance quite a few times, so that's a recurring. Good to see your priorities. I just want to ask a little bit about the UK handling of the COP, and obviously, in many ways it's been very good. I'm sure you've got lots of good things to say. I just want to ask about two specific things. One was what you thought about the fact that there appear to be no women on the senior team. We've got Alak and Kwasi and Carney and Topping and all very talented people, but they're all men. What do you think about that first?
Well, we of course have in our process also a commitment, and this has been taken up by parties to make really the process as inclusive as possible in all senses, including the fact that for delegations, for example, that they should include young people, and really also support the participation of women. I was therefore I was really very, very happy to see that there was a special envoy on adaptation designated, which is a high level, also very competent woman that is now part of this high level team. I would say that yes, globally we still have a very big challenge in making this inclusiveness be part of our everyday life at every level. So I know that the UK team has also heard this, very clearly heard this message.
Got you. And is it, in your opinion, is it right that a high-income developed country allows a new coal mine to go ahead?
Well, of course, the phasing out coal is one of the central points that has been put forward also by the Secretary General as a way to really get us on the right path. And I think, I mean, on our side, we insist on this. We understand and we see the realities in many countries that make it very difficult. Sometimes it's the economic reality, sometimes it's political reality, sometimes it's really even social context. But we will certainly continue to stress the need to continue to make efforts to phase out coal as soon as possible.
Okay, I will. Just one last UK question. Sorry, I will move on. I just wondered as well. The UK government obviously cut overseas aid. I'm sure you may not want to comment on the UK specifically, but given your points about finance, how helpful is it countries cutting overseas aid at this point?
Well, in general, I think that what we are seeing in the world is that inequalities are a source of tensions, stress, and in many cases of conflict. Normally, conflicts have different sources, but one of them is inequalities. I am coming from a country that has also a very big challenge in terms of inequalities. And so that is certainly a reality that we need to address. And the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that agenda really tries to address precisely this situation. Leave no one behind is the general theme of the SDGs, right? So that means that going back to the point I was making, that in my view, support for other countries needs to be seen as really supporting our own self-interests. And the same happens within the countries. You have a very unequal country like my home country. Yes, well, you really need to address it, because that divide between the rich and the poor is not going to be helpful for your economy, for your social development, for really giving the population the standard of living that they deserve.
Got you. Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. And just on the geopolitics of this year, are they getting worse or better for climate change? On the one hand, you have Biden, on the other, you have US-China relations are not brilliant, and UK-China relations are slightly strained by Hong Kong, amongst other things. I just wondered, are we, are they getting better or worse in your opinion for climate change?
Well, I think that what we have seen in the last months, maybe since September, since the last General Assembly, what we are seeing is actually signals that point to a more positive environment regarding climate change. That is, of course, facing the challenge of an overall scenario where countries are facing the consequences of COVID. Yeah. But in general, I mean, in terms of the expressions about increased commitments regarding climate change, I think we can be, there is reason for optimism. Now, of course, what we need now is to have those expressions translated in very specific plans for the next, not the next 5 years, this year, this year and next year, and that is the challenge. So I would say I'm optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic, because we need the longer term goals to be translated into actual decisions today.
Would you mind giving one or two examples of what the reasons for optimism were? You said there's reasons for optimism. It would just be good to have one or two ideas of why you say that.
Yeah, well, for example, what we have seen regarding China committing to achieving carbon neutrality before 2060, I think is really something that just a year ago we would not have thought that would happen. Of course, the U.S. rejoining the Paris Agreement immediately after the new administration took over. That's also a very important signal. The Republic of Korea also making commitments. Japan, the Green Deal by the European Union that implied a very long process. The UK's very ambitious goals as well. And also, I would say in recent weeks, some comments, for example, by the UK presidency about the need to put together a very good finance package that could support the hopefully very ambitious outcomes by COP26. All these, in my view, are positive signals.
Okay, great, thank you. And we just we're talking, here via video call. I just wondered, obviously COVID, you've mentioned, quite rightly mentioned a few times. I just wondered, can you do the diplomacy that needs to be done, be done through this format, because obviously it has its pros and cons, and people talk about it being, excluding some people and so on. I wondered, can you get the diplomacy done that you need to get done between you and the UK and others?
Well, we are actually struggling with that already since last year. It is a big change. But the point I would make is that we have no choice. When we see the climate emergency, when we see the difficult situation that we are facing, of course, I would love to go and meet with everyone and have everybody together, but this is just not possible. And what I find very difficult is to really justify going out to the public and saying, oh, we cannot work because we cannot meet. While we are seeing that, whole governments are finding ways of making their tasks in a different way. Companies are doing the same, and we are literally, we need to adapt to this reality. There's no, while the climate emergency continues to worsen, we cannot just say, okay, but we cannot meet and therefore we can do nothing about it,
So that's a very fair point.
I've been pushing on that, and I fully understand the very important concerns regarding connectivity in some countries, regarding the different time zones, regarding, even also the difficulty of making negotiations of very specific negotiations of texts through virtual means. But as long as there is no alternative, I just think this is our duty.
That's a good answer. And obviously, as a science publication, we are very interested in the IPCC. It's the first report will be out around July, hopefully. I wondered how, the 1.5 report, I think, took everyone by surprise, in 2018, as how much it broke through. It's not often science reports become placards on the street, right? I just wondered, how important do you think the report will be this year, and what role do you see it playing and influencing the talks?
Well, our process is really a process based on science, on scientific knowledge, and the IPCC is really at the core of that scientific basis for our work. So, yes, the next report by the IPCC will certainly be received with a lot of expectation. I would say that from the place we are now, we're looking at most probably not a very positive or not a very encouraging report. We don't know we don't have any information yet on that. You may know that IPCC works in a very confidential manner until the very end. But looking at what is on the table until now and the data available, I think that IPCC won't be able to bring us very good news. So in that regard, I certainly hope that the report will help us in impressing even more the sense of urgency for decision making, for rectification of some of the processes that need to be done. I'm hopeful also it will, for example, encourage more investment in development of technologies and innovation in looking for climate solutions. I hope that we can benefit from that report in a positive way, constructive way going forward.
Well, that's interesting about your point about urgency, because I think, my guess would be that a lot of the headlines will be around the point about climate sensitivity, this idea of, what happens if you double CO2 in the atmosphere, and that's obviously going to generally come out, the bottom ranges come up and the top ranges come down a little bit, but overall it's going to be world is going to be warmer than we thought type thing. So you do think it will inject that sense of urgency?
Well, I mean, if I am a decision maker, if I was a leader, then I see this report. I think that my reaction would be to say, well, then we really need to get our act together. We really have that responsibility. It's I frequently say I think that regarding climate change, the only thing we cannot do is give up.
Sure.
Especially people like me and so many others that have a possibility in decision making and in influencing the way that things will develop. We may not be successful, but at least we tried, right?
Sure.
That's what we are, the minimum that we can give to those who have put trust on us.
Talking of those who've put trust in us, I wanted to ask about the sort of youth movements we've seen in the Fridays for the Future and others. I mean, COVID has obviously made them a lot less visible. I'm conscious, certainly in the UK at least, when they were visible, that made a real difference to the politics here. Does it make your job harder that there's not young climate protesters in the streets?
Well, I think that they are still very visible, but now in this virtual world, right? That maybe it's probably also a bit of a generational thing. The youth they probably spend more time in the virtual world than in real world. But yes, definitely, this awakening of the youth has been just fascinating to observe. And I think they have really a lot of credibility in doing that, because it's really about their future, the future of their children. And it is very, very worrying to see the level of stress that this has brought onto some young people. Young people really asking themselves, should I have a family? Do I want to have a family? Is that something that would be at all logical? So I think it also raises a lot of questions about the values of our society, right? The importance of reevaluating also what is really important. When I was young, having a car was, wow, you finally got your car. Now, probably, for young people is precisely not to have a car. If you have a car, then you're in the wrong side of history. You need to be much more attentive. Why? Because you value nature, you value the water, you value clean water, clean air, you value other things.
Got you. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I wanted to ask you about sort of your agenda at UN Climate Change obviously overlaps with. There's a lot of talk of this year being like year of super summits, and so this sort of language, and obviously biodiversity. There's a lot of potential overlap between the solutions to that and the solutions to climate change. But I guess the reality is there doesn't seem to be a lot of action actually drawing those threads together. It's not even clear if the biodiversity summit is going to happen this year. I wondered, how hopeful are you that might change, and what is the sort of nature solution that might be sort of landed on? For what role fixing biodiversity can play in fixing climate change. I wonder, do you know what I mean? Because it's not clear to me what China wants out of the meeting at Kunming. I wonder how hopeful are you those two can come together, and what might it be on?
Well, my first comment would be that I think we need to look at the so-called 3 Rio conventions as one integrated agenda: climate change, biodiversity, and desertification. I think this is really very, very important. And yes, the fact that we have 3 different conventions for different reasons, partly also maybe for distribution of labor, right? At national governments and internationally as well. But I think this is very important, that we see it as an integrated agenda. It all goes together. Second, to share with you that I have a very, very close dialogue with the heads of the other 2 Rio conventions. We are trying to really benefit from each other's experiences in driving the process forward. I cannot speak to exactly what is the expectation about the outcome of the other COPs, but basically what I would say is that we are trying to learn from each other. What kind of discussions, what kind of role are the bureaus of the different conferences undertaking in driving the process forward? What kind of platforms and possibilities we can offer in order to advance in this virtual mode of work? We're trying to support each other, and also we're trying to give parties a more coordinated and consistent approach. Of course, at the end, we in the secretariats are the facilitators. We provide the platforms, and parties are the ones who need to take the decision.
Sure. Yeah, no, fair enough. And I just wanted a slightly sort of technical question around UN climate change and the Paris framework. I just wanted to ask about we've got the 2023 global stocktake. I just wondered, could countries resubmit their NDCs after that? And if they could, would you welcome that?
Well, the Paris Agreement foresees that any country can revise its NDC if they want to increase ambition. So that is actually something, the objective of Paris was to create a top-down, bottom-up system that would really encourage parties to become every time more ambitious. So this is something that can happen. Of course, we welcome that. This is also why we are now calling on those countries that have submitted NDCs before the end of 2020 to go back, look at them again, and see if they can review them and increase their level of ambition.
Got you. So that was a yes, basically. Yeah,
Yes.
a yes and a yes. Okay. And just I just wanted to, on the NDC synthesis report, just briefly coming back to that. I imagine some people might, come away from that quite fatalistic, and I've already, I read a few pieces around the time of people saying, okay, look, this is time to acknowledge that 1.5 degrees is out of reach. I wonder, what do you say to those people? I suspect it might come back to your never give up point earlier on, but go on.
Well, I do say that science is still telling us that we can still make, turn this around. So this is the information we have from science. What we have seen in terms of transformations in the last 2 years is really unprecedented. If we think about the way that solar energy has evolved and other types of renewable energies have evolved as well. If we look at the way that the people were able to adapt to a completely new reality out of the pandemic in such a short time, literally everyone in the face of the planet, I think we can be hopeful. And we also, if we look at the solutions that are available out there, even going into the what is happening in the what we call the non-party stakeholders, which are businesses, investors, etc. The Race to Zero campaign and the way that the amount of commitments that we are seeing there, that also makes us really very, very hopeful. And at the end, well, humanity has faced in the past really just situations that in many cases people would have thought, oh, this is over. This is the end of the world, and it didn't happen. So, yeah, I am an optimist, but I like being an optimist also.
I was going to ask you, I mean, just on a personal note, how do you stay hopeful? Because you read the same stuff I do, right? And you see the impacts of climate change here and now, and you can see the gap on how much more action. I mean, what is it that makes you stay hopeful? You sort of touched on it a bit there, but I just meant on a more personal level.
Yeah, well, in this job, I also see so many just amazing stories, so many amazing examples of initiatives that go forward. I am a strong believer in multilateralism, in spite of all the, of course, the weaknesses of the multilateral system. If we didn't have a multilateral system that has put for the world a set of standards regarding so many things, I think that that makes me hopeful. And in the case of climate change, we have a very clear pathway. That is the Paris Agreement. I frequently say that the Paris Agreement is a covenant of hope with the people of the world. It tells the world, look, yes, we can do this, and this is the way that we can do it. And so we're not lost. Solutions are there, and we have to get to work every day.
Okay, and just in terms of what's next for the UNFCCC Secretariat for sort of drive. This is a slightly geeky question, but for what's next for the Secretariat in terms of driving implementation of the climate change agenda? How do you evolve as an organization?
Well, as you know, there are different big areas of work for the organization. But if we look at the next step, let's imagine we have a very successful conference in November. We have finalized all the guidelines for full implementation of the Paris Agreement. what comes next? This regime is built on transparency. Transparency as the source of trust among all parties, that everyone is really complying with what they committed to. So we will need to put in place a very, very robust and strong transparency system, which will mean we get information from parties. The Secretariat has to process it in very technical ways, but then we are the ones that will show the world exactly what is happening in the different parts. We are also the entity that has as one of its very important tasks to facilitate the support to developing countries in this transition. Regarding technologies, regarding capacity building, regarding finance. We're not an executing entity like UNDP or other UN entities, but we can facilitate that. And we certainly hope that we will become, the climate hub, the place to go if you want to know anything about climate and how you can make that transition and that transformation.
Do you think it'd be useful if you had more of an arm like that, like the UNDP element of actually doing stuff on the ground, about on maybe very narrow things about like technology transfer or not?
Well, I think that I have spent most of my career in the multilateral sphere, and I think we have a lot of institutions around the world. So I think that what we need is a better alignment of what is it that it is needed. And I think we are making an effort. I would say that we are working very closely with UNDP and other entities, but there's a huge room for improvement on how to align the efforts of all these entities. And in that sense, yes, probably one area that would need to be strengthened in the Secretariat would be this, interagency work and coordination.
I see what you mean. Okay. I'm conscious of your time. I'm just a sort of last question or so, if I may. You mentioned obviously, the reasons for optimism earlier on, and one of the things that we've got, had at the end of last year was some real progress on the long-term goals on net zero. But obviously, there's still quite a gap between that and the short-term goals. I wondered, how long can we? How sustainable is that situation where we've got, countries like Japan, South Korea, and China saying net zero by 2050 or 2060, but their short-term targets don't marry up with that?
Well, this is a big challenge now, right? And this is precisely why we are now stressing, underlining the need to review the NDCs, even those that have been recently presented, and to look at them carefully and see if we can increase ambition. And as bad as the news, the data are, I would hope that they can also help us in giving this push to a higher level of ambition. For many businesses and also for many different actors in society, it has become clear that this is really about survival. So I certainly hope that we will see a bigger awareness and really much more commitment in all different sectors of society on this.
Okay, I'm probably pushing my luck here, but can you tell me how many countries have told you that they will resubmit yet? You put a number on that?
No.
Fair enough. Look, you've been very generous with your time and your answers. Is there anything that you feel is really, as we look ahead for the rest of the year, is there anything important we haven't touched on that you wanted to?
Well, maybe something that could seem like a very not such an important issue, but to underline the importance of doing making progress virtually. Because we are still in this discussion, and that is really a big challenge. We need to get to Glasgow with already a very good understanding of what the outcomes of the conference will be. And as I mentioned before, I really think Glasgow will be a credibility test for the fight against climate change. So if we are not coming out of the conference with a positive message, that is really going to have very negative consequences.
Got you. Okay, great. Do you think it'll happen in person, Executive Secretary? Do you think that's likely that it'll happen? Because obviously, who knows?
I'm hopeful. We
Okay.
are planning with this scenario. Yes.
I should keep my flexible hotel booking then, yeah? Okay.
Yes. And we are, yes, at the same time, we are also keeping our efforts to strengthen our virtual capabilities to make it hopefully, the most inclusive conference ever.
Brilliant. Okay, well, lovely to talk, and thank you so much for being so articulate and eloquent on it all. Okay, super.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you again. Thank you now. Bye-bye for you.
Bye.